Washington State is arguably the most beautiful state there is, with huge waterfalls and rows of mountains as far as the eye can see. The evergreen state is home to many lakes, but there is one lake in particular that has a dark and mysterious past. With more than 5,000 surface acres, Lake Crescent on Washington State's Olympic Peninsula is a body of deep blue water that has always been popular with campers, fishermen, and boaters. The lake's water is exceptionally clear, caused by a lack of nitrogen, which inhibits the growth of algae. Before highways were built in the area in the early 1920s, Lake Crescent was used as a route from Port Townsend into the northwestern part of the Olympic Peninsula, and ferries and steamboats were used to transport passengers and freight. Nestled in the northern foothills of the Olympic Mountains, Lake Crescent lies about 18 miles west of Port Angeles. The pristine waters of this deep, glacially carved lake make it an ideal destination for those in search of natural beauty. Several lodges and campgrounds at the lake welcome visitors from around the world, but the lake's beauty can also be mysterious and even fatal. Way back on July 3, 1929, a local couple named Russell and Blanche Warren disappeared while driving near the lake. Blanche Warren had just been released from the hospital in Port Angeles, and the couple was on their way home through a logging camp on the Bogachil River near Forks. Earlier in the day, they had purchased a new washing machine and loaded it into their 1927 Chevrolet. They never arrived home, and speculation at the time was that the Warrens had missed a curve on the winding road around the lake and drowned. The only clues searchers could find were a cap identified as Russell's and a visor from a Chevrolet. The Warrens left behind two sons, Charles, who was 11 at the time, and Frank, who was 13. Both have since passed away. Ironically, Charles Warren drowned in 1964 in a fishing accident off the California coast, and his body was never recovered. Years after the Warrens disappeared, local historian Bob Casso brought the long-forgotten mystery to light, and in 2002, a team of volunteers using high-tech underwater search equipment located the Warrens' car at a depth of over 170 feet below the surface of the lake, about 4 miles west of Barnes Point, near milepost 223 on U.S. Highway 101. They reported that the car was resting on its left side and tilting downward on a steep slope, and was remarkably intact. No human remains were recovered, but family members said that they were comforted just knowing the young couple's fate. Blanche and Russell Warren have been resting here comfortably in the lake for the last 72 years, and I almost feel like we're disturbing them by going down there. This is a gravesite, a special place, Park Ranger Dan Pontbriand said. On June 9, 2017, 37-year-old Travis Valenti from Massapequa, New York, was kayaking with his fiancée when his kayak began taking on water. Mr. Valenti attempted to continue paddling but ultimately had to abandon his kayak and entered the water. As Mr. Valenti's fiancée attempted rescue, her kayak overturned, resulting in her also entering the water. She was able to swim to shore, but unfortunately Mr. Valenti struggled and could not. Lake Crescent is a deep and very cold body of water with surface water temperatures near 50 degrees this time of year. Sudden immersion into cold water will impact a person's breathing and, over time, their ability to move extremities. Swimmers are encouraged to use a buddy system. Boaters should always wear a life jacket and understand the risks of recreating on large bodies of water, such as underwater hazards, wind, waves, and water temperature. On June 21, 2017, at approximately 6:25 p.m., Olympic National Park, in conjunction with Christian Aid Ministries, a non-profit organization from Berlin, Ohio, recovered Travis Valenti's body from Lake Crescent. Christian Aid Ministries began searching Lake Crescent around 8 in the morning using boat-mounted sonar technology. Once the group acquired a high-probability find of the body, Olympic National Park was notified, and 2 park rangers were dispatched in a boat to meet the group on the lake. Christian Aid Ministries then used a remote-operated vehicle, ROV, to locate the body in the water. The body was found at a depth of 394 feet. The ROV was equipped with a grabber tool, which allowed them to bring the body to the surface. Mr. Valenti's body was brought aboard the National Park Service boat and then brought ashore. The coroner's office was notified, as well as the family of the victim. The Lady of the Lake is a story about an oddly preserved corpse found floating in Crescent Lake. The lake is no stranger to bloody stories. According to legend, the Klallam and Quileute tribes fought a bloody battle beneath Mount Storm King. The mountain became angry, broke off a chunk of rock from his peak, and threw it into the valley over the battlefield. The rock unalived the warriors and dammed the river, creating Crescent Lake. Generations of Native Americans would not go near the lake because of this legend. It was said that Crescent Lake never gave up its deceased until the Lady of the Lake surfaced in 1940. The story of the lady starts at the tavern on the edge of Crescent Lake in the northwest part of Olympic National Park. It was 1936, and Hallie worked at the tavern as a barmaid. At the age of 35, she had just ended her second marriage. Unlucky at love. But Hallie gave it another try and married Montgomery Monty Illingworth in June that same year. He was a beer truck driver, and she had met him at the tavern. Poor Hallie. She had a habit of choosing the wrong man. Monty didn't bother hiding his assaults. Hallie would come to work with bruises and black eyes, and she confided with a coworker that Monty had choked her and broken one of her teeth. After just 5 months of marriage, the police were called to break up a fight between the couple in the early morning hours outside of the tavern. Hallie disappeared on the morning of December 22, 1937. Good old. Monty told everyone that Hallie had run off with a sailor from Alaska, but the story seemed fishy. Despite suspicion, Monty was granted a divorce in 1938. He moved to California with the roommate of Hallie's sister. In 1940, a body surfaced on Lake Crescent. The body was wrapped in blankets and tied with rope. But that's not the spooky part. The body's skin had turned into a rubbery substance and was perfectly preserved. It was not bloated like most bodies held in water, and there was no decay. She was perfectly preserved other than missing facial features, fingers, and toes. It also showed evidence of being beaten and strangled. The doctors called it an ivory soap corpse because of the skin's condition. This was because of a process known as saponification, which converts fatty acids into soap. Lake Crescent's depth is not known with certainty, but likely has parts that are deeper than 1,000 feet. When the body had been submerged in the deep waters of the lake, the cold prevented decomposition, and the salts and calcium in the water slowly converted the tissue into a material like soap called adipocere. Just like soap, a body converted in this manner floats. Although this one had been apparently weighted down, the ropes connecting to the weights eventually decayed, allowing the body to float to the surface. Even though there could be no facial recognition or fingerprints, police made a positive identification of the body as Hallie Illingworth because of the physical match, hair color, and dental records. The police also had a clue to the killer, the rope. This rope, it seems, was peculiar to Sears and Roebuck. Through receipts, it was tracked to the tavern owner, who had bought it to tie up boats. The tavern owner remembered that a beer salesman borrowed 100 feet of rope to pull his truck out of the mud. He had never returned the rope, and the beer salesman was Monty. Monty Illingworth was extradited from California and stood trial for Hallie's murder. He claimed that the body wasn't Hallie and that he had seen her alive, but Hallie's dentist testified to her identification. Monty was found guilty and served 9 years in prison before being paroled. Human remains found on bottom of Lake Crescent near car that plunged in 1929. Divers have uncovered human remains submerged in Lake Crescent near a car that plunged into the lake 75 years ago. A diver from Mill Creek who first spotted the missing vehicle of Russell and Blanche. Warren said he unintentionally found a human femur and skull cap about 100 feet from the car during a commemorative dive. I was not expecting to find human bones, so it was a bit of a start that I saw those, John Rawlings said. Olympic National Park announced the discovery of human remains in the afternoon on June 2, 2004. The find has prompted a temporary restriction for diving in part of Lake Crescent until the bones can be uncovered, park spokeswoman Barb Maines said. Though the bones were found near the Warrens' 1927 Chevrolet, they could belong to anyone, she said. Several people have disappeared in the general vicinity of the car, west of Barnes Point, within the last 40 or 50 years, she said. It's intriguing that the bones were found so close to the Warren vehicle, but we have no way of knowing at this point whose remains these are, she said. Driving past Lake Crescent on U.S. Highway 101, with its many twists and turns as it hugs the shoreline, one cannot help but wonder what other mysteries might still be hidden beneath all of that beautiful blue water, just waiting to be discovered.